Apple means all protocol observed. Someone with Apple, so Apple, thank you very much. Anyway, on behalf of Mutaba Investment Fund, which is the government shareholder representative of Air Zimbabwe, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to you, honorable ministers, and all few guests who are here in all your capacities for gracing this event. It's very important when you call people to an event and they come. So I want to thank you for sparing your time to be with us. We are immensely delighted that the efforts that have been put in place by the fund in Air Zimbabwe and government of Zimbabwe has paid dividend today by the arrival of this Airbus A330. We are so excited.
Air Zimbabwe has finally returned to the London route, and this is a development that many Zimbabweans, especially those living in the United Kingdom, have been waiting to see for a very long time. After about 14 years without a direct Air Zimbabwe service between Harare and London, the national airline is once again connecting the two destinations. And this time, the story is coming with a very important aircraft, an Airbus A330. The aircraft has arrived in Zimbabwe, and Air Zimbabwe has now resumed direct flights between Harare and London Gatwick. This is a big moment for Zimbabwe's aviation industry because the Harare-London route was once one of the most important international routes operated by the national airline. For many Zimbabweans, this is not simply about getting on an aircraft and flying to another country. It is about convenience. It is about reconnecting families. It is about business. It is about tourism. And for Zimbabweans living in the diaspora, it is also about having another option when traveling back home. The latest reports confirm that Air Zimbabwe has restarted the direct Harare-London Gatwick service after a 14-year suspension. The airline is initially operating the route 3 times every week, with flights from Harare scheduled on Sundays, Wednesdays and Fridays, while return flights from London Gatwick operate on Mondays, Thursdays and Saturdays. Now, let us talk about the Airbus A330, because this is where the story becomes even more interesting. The aircraft being used for this route is not simply an aircraft that Air Zimbabwe suddenly bought and placed into service. The operation is being supported through what is called an ACMI arrangement. In simple English, another airline is providing the aircraft, the crew, maintenance and insurance, while Air Zimbabwe manages the commercial side of the operation and sells the tickets under its own flight code. The aircraft is being supplied by Spanish airline Plus Ultra, giving Air Zimbabwe the capacity it needs to operate this long-distance route while it works on strengthening its own operations. This is an important detail because some people may look at the Airbus A330 and immediately think Air Zimbabwe has purchased a brand new long-haul aircraft. That is not what the current arrangement means. The aircraft is being provided under a leasing arrangement with Plus Ultra supplying the aircraft and operational support. Reports say the A330-300 has a capacity of around 302 passengers, including business class and economy class seating. But whether the aircraft is owned or leased, the bigger question is this: what does the return of the direct London flight actually mean for ordinary Zimbabweans? Well, the first answer is simple. It means less time spent changing planes. For years, passengers traveling between Zimbabwe and the United Kingdom often had to connect through other major airports. That could mean traveling through Addis Ababa, Johannesburg, Doha, Dubai, or other international hubs, depending on the airline and the ticket purchased. And anyone who has traveled long distance knows that connecting flights can be tiring. You leave one airport, you arrive at another airport, you wait. You go through another security process, you check the departure board, you wait again. Sometimes you have to spend several hours inside an airport before boarding another aircraft. For families traveling with children, elderly passengers, and people carrying a lot of luggage, these connections can make the journey even more difficult. So now, with a direct Harare-London service available again, passengers have another choice. And that is the key word here, choice. It does not mean every traveler will automatically use Air Zimbabwe. It does not mean other airlines will disappear from the route. What it means is that passengers now have another option to consider when planning their journey. And that can be very important. If the service is reliable and the pricing remains competitive, this route could attract a strong number of passengers. In fact, early reports indicate that Air Zimbabwe had already secured significant passenger bookings and cargo interest before the relaunch, suggesting that there is demand for a direct connection between Zimbabwe and the United Kingdom. Now, let us look at why London is such an important destination for Zimbabwe. The United Kingdom has a large Zimbabwean community. There are Zimbabweans living, working, and studying in different parts of Britain. Many of them still have close family connections back home. Some travel to Zimbabwe for holidays, some return for family events, some travel for business, some come home to visit their parents and relatives, and some simply want to reconnect with the country they call home. So, when a national airline restores a direct connection between Harare and London, the impact can go beyond aviation. It can affect tourism, it can affect business, it can affect family travel, and it can also help Zimbabwe present itself as a country that is trying to improve its international connections. This is why the return of the route is attracting so much attention. But let us also be realistic. The biggest test is not the arrival of the aircraft. The biggest test is keeping the service running successfully. Because starting a route is one thing, maintaining it is another thing. Passengers will be watching carefully. They will want to know whether the flights will operate on time. They will want to know whether tickets will remain available. They will want to know whether the airline can maintain the schedule consistently. And of course, they will want competitive prices. This is where Air Zimbabwe will face its biggest challenge. The airline has a history of operational and financial difficulties, and the London route has been absent for a long period. So, while the return of the route is certainly positive news, the real success will be measured over time. Can Air Zimbabwe maintain the service? Can it keep the aircraft available? Can it provide good customer service? Can it compete with established international airlines? And can it build enough confidence among passengers to make people say, yes, I will book my next trip home with Air Zimbabwe? These are the questions that will matter in the months ahead. And this is where I want to hear from you. If you are a Zimbabwean living in the United Kingdom, or if you regularly travel between Zimbabwe and Britain, would you consider using Air Zimbabwe for your next trip? Would you choose a direct flight even if another airline offered a cheaper ticket with 1 or 2 connections? Or would you say that price is more important than convenience? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you are enjoying this update, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because we will continue bringing you important stories and developments from Zimbabwe and across Africa. Now, there is another interesting part of this story. For many years, the idea of Air Zimbabwe returning to London sounded like something that was always being discussed but never fully happening. There were plans, there were announcements, there were delays, there were different target dates. But now, the aircraft has arrived and the direct service has actually resumed. That is why this moment feels different. This time, passengers are not simply hearing that the route might return in the future. The service is now operating. Reports indicate that the first direct service has already been restored, marking the end of the long break in the route. And this brings us to the bigger conversation about Air Zimbabwe itself. What happens next? Because the London route can become more than just a single route. It could become a test of whether Air Zimbabwe is entering a new chapter. The airline has been under pressure for many years, and its return to a major international destination is a significant step. But the airline will need to show that it can operate in a stable and professional way. Passengers want reliability, businesses want certainty, tourism operators want predictable schedules, and the diaspora wants confidence that when they book a ticket, they can travel without unnecessary complications. That is why the next few months will be very important. If Air Zimbabwe successfully operates the London route 3 times a week, maintains its schedule, and delivers a good passenger experience, It could strengthen confidence in the airline. And if demand continues to grow, there could be conversations about expanding the service in the future. But once again, the key word is consistency. A national airline cannot depend only on big announcements. It needs to deliver every time. The aircraft needs to arrive, the passengers need to board, the flights need to operate, the luggage needs to reach its destination, and customers need to feel that they are getting value for their money. That is how an airline builds trust, and trust is very important in aviation. Now, let us also talk about the possible impact on Zimbabwe's economy. When international passengers arrive in Zimbabwe, they spend money. They stay in hotels, they use transport services, they visit tourist attractions, they eat in restaurants, they buy goods and services. Business travelers attend meetings and conferences. Tourists visit places such as Victoria Falls. And Zimbabweans living abroad who come home also contribute to economic activity. So, improved air connectivity can support different parts of the economy. Of course, we should not exaggerate the impact. One flight route alone cannot solve all of Zimbabwe's economic challenges. But better international connections can create opportunities. The return of the London route can make it easier for people to travel directly between the two countries, and that can support tourism, trade, and investment links. Zimbabwean officials and aviation reports have also pointed to these wider benefits. And there is another interesting angle. This route can also be important for cargo. When we talk about flights, many people think only about passengers, but aircraft also carry goods. Businesses may need to move products, families may need to send items, companies may need faster access to international markets. Reports around the relaunch have indicated strong early interest in cargo as well as passenger bookings. So, if the route performs well, the benefits could extend beyond people simply traveling from Harare to London. It could become part of a larger business connection between Zimbabwe and the United Kingdom. Now, there is something else I want us to discuss. What does this mean for Zimbabwe's image? When an airline from a country returns to a major international city after 14 years, people naturally pay attention. It creates a sense that something is changing. It shows that Zimbabwe is trying to improve its connections with the outside world. But again, the real story will be what happens next. The world is watching not just to see whether Air Zimbabwe can return to London. People will be watching to see whether the airline can stay there. Can it operate successfully? Can it attract enough passengers? Can it build a reputation for reliability? Can it grow? Those are the questions that will determine whether this becomes a lasting success. And for me, this is why the story is bigger than the Airbus A330. The aircraft is the visible symbol. But behind that aircraft is a much bigger story about Zimbabwe trying to reconnect itself with international markets. And for Zimbabweans in the diaspora, there is also an emotional side to this. Imagine living in London for many years and finally seeing the national airline of your home country return to the route. For some people, that will bring a sense of pride. For others, it will simply be about convenience. For others, it will come down to one thing: how much does the ticket cost? And that is perfectly understandable. At the end of the day, passengers will make their decision based on several factors: price, reliability, travel time, customer service, baggage allowance, and the overall experience. So, Air Zimbabwe now has an opportunity. The airline has another chance to prove itself on one of the most important international routes connected to Zimbabwe. But opportunity comes with responsibility. The airline must protect the confidence of passengers. It must listen to customer concerns. It must maintain the aircraft and the schedule properly. And it must make sure that the return of the London route becomes a long-term success story. Because the worst thing that could happen would be for passengers to become excited today and disappointed tomorrow. People want consistency. They want to know that the flight they book today will still be available when they need to travel. So, this is where I believe the public will be watching closely. The return of direct Harare-London flights is certainly a major development. But the next chapter will be even more important. Will Air Zimbabwe continue operating the route successfully? Will passenger numbers increase? Will the airline add more international destinations in the future? Could this become the beginning of a wider expansion? These are questions that only time will answer. But for now, one thing is clear. After 14 years, Air Zimbabwe is back on the Harare-London connection. The Airbus A330 has arrived, the direct route has resumed, and Zimbabwe now has a direct air link with London Gatwick once again. For travelers, that means another option. For the Zimbabwean diaspora, it means a more direct way to travel home. For businesses, it could create new opportunities. For tourism, it could bring more visitors. And for Air Zimbabwe, it represents a major test. The airline has been given an opportunity to rebuild confidence and show that it can operate a major international route successfully. Now the question is whether it can keep the momentum going. And I want to ask you this before we end. Do you believe the return of Air Zimbabwe's direct London flights will be a major success? Do you think Zimbabweans in the UK will support the national airline? And if you were traveling from London to Harare, would you choose Air Zimbabwe's direct flight? Or would you still prefer to use another international airline with a connecting flight? Tell me your opinion in the comment section. Also, if you are watching this and you have already traveled on the new route, we would love to hear your experience. How was the flight? How was the service? Was the journey comfortable? And most importantly, would you fly with Air Zimbabwe again? Your experience could help other travelers make better decisions. So make sure you share your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you do not miss our next update. Because this is a story that we will continue to watch. The return of the Airbus A330 to Harare is exciting, but the real journey for Air Zimbabwe is only beginning. The airline now has to prove that this is not just a comeback. It has to prove that this is the beginning of a new and more reliable chapter. For now, passengers traveling between Zimbabwe and the United Kingdom finally have something they have not had for many years: a direct Air Zimbabwe connection between Harare and London. 14 years later, the route is back, and now everyone will be watching to see where Air Zimbabwe goes from here.